They tried to lose another close one late, but in the end, Kansas comes through with a big overtime victory over UCF. They're on to the Big 12 quarterfinals. We're going to recap the game and look ahead to Arizona on today's episode of Locked On Jayhawks.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. Thank you for joining us anywhere you get your podcasts or on our YouTube page. And on today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, we're recapping KU escaping UCF. Some more problems in the clutch for KU at the end, but I guess they came through in the clutch in the single overtime at the end, and they're moving on to the Big 12 quarterfinals to take on Arizona. So we'll also at the end of the show touch on a game preview for Kansas against Arizona coming up on Thursday. Today's episode, Locked On Jayhawks, is brought to you by TurboTax. Ready for stress-free taxes and the most money-back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert on TurboTax. Kansas 98, UCF 94. Jayhawks able to, I guess at this time of year, the old cliche, survive in advance. It really felt like KU was surviving in this one. And Kansas ends up getting the win. That is the most important thing here. You earn a victory, you move on to Thursday night, you add another victory now to where you're 4-2 in the new season. You've won 2 games in a row. You hope this, starts a run for you in this tournament in Kansas City. But man, this team just cannot figure it out in the clutch. Even in a game where they win a close game down the stretch. This was KU's first win by 4 or less points since they beat UCF by 4 points in Allen Fieldhouse. Before that, the last time they beat a team by 4 points or less was the Duke win back in November. So they don't have a lot of these close wins. Part of that has been, they've had some blowout wins and, you're losing some of these games. But we've seen so many dumb plays down the stretch for this team over different games, right? You think of the end of the Houston game. That one is kind of the on top of the mountain, so to speak, of the dumb plays you made at the end of the game. The Texas Tech game recently with some of your late game possessions, the West Virginia game that got Big 12 play started. Some of your late play has been really bad for Kansas so far this season, which is very odd because typically Bill Self teams like that has been something they execute so well down the clutch or down the end of the game. And additionally, winning those close games, winning those 1-score games. But that hasn't been the case for this year's team. And it almost was the case again in this game. You are in a position where you have a couple chances to put it away. Some things happen. You give up the 3. You have the turnover from KJ at the end of the game. And that one is tough because, to be clear, KJ Adams had a good game here for Kansas. And I've said this all along. KJ is like a hammer. There's a very specific use for the hammer that can make it very valuable. Sometimes the usage being asked of that hammer is being asked to be an ice scraper on the windshield or to vacuum the floor. That ain't what the hammer does. And the amount of times that Kansas has gone to KJ Adams in clutch possessions this season, like the West Virginia game certainly comes to mind in that area. You go to him twice. He had the mid-range jumper that he missed and then he steps out of bounds, is maddening to me because that's just something where it's like, KJ's has his uses, the defensive end, the hustling, the dunking, the transition play, stuff like that. I think he's done a good job as being the inbounder. That's something, that they obviously had to fix after the Houston game, and he was able to get the inbounds in. I think he was the guy doing it a majority of the time in this game down the end of the game, right? There's certain uses and that make KJ a very valuable player for this team, but it's like, why are you asking him to do that? And that's been a consistent all year long. And yeah, I mean, even like this one didn't end up coming back to haunt him because you win in the first overtime. But when you're allowing Jordan Ivy Curry to make that layup with, I think it was like 18 seconds left, and you foul him, you cannot foul them in that situation. That is like an absolute no-no for you. And it's just those little things that Kansas has not done well in the clutch this season. So it's odd because I come away with it, you should be happy about the win. And that is, again, the most important thing here. But I'm still sitting there going, man, I don't know about this team in the clutch. And the reason that's important is because there's a good chance you're going to have another game here, whether it's, on Thursday against Arizona or whether it's in the NCAA tournament or both. That's going to come down to clutch plays, and you're going to have to come through with those. And at this point in the season, we haven't seen enough of it really since the Duke game and I guess the 2 UCF games now where Kansas has been able to get by. Now maybe you winning a game close, even though you didn't do your best down the stretch. Maybe that's enough for you to get over that confidence boost hump that maybe you lost from the Houston game, to where maybe this can be what, starts getting the clutch play going again. Outside of that, though, I mean, this was a game where very fun to watch overall. Both UCF games, obviously not, well, I guess all UCF games were fun to watch from a Kansas perspective, because the first was a blowout. That was fun to watch. And then the last two were fun to watch just because they were really good basketball games, back and forth, high scoring. The offense was really good for Kansas in this game. 45% from the floor. You shoot 44% from three, 12 of 27 from the outside. You needed all of them. And we've probably gone too long without mentioning maybe the biggest story of the game. No, it wasn't Hunter Dickinson's big double-double. He was great in the second half and overtime. No, it wasn't Zeke Mayo going for 24 points and looking like the guy in Allen Fieldhouse. No, it wasn't KJ Adams having a 15-7-5 game. Like, those are all reasonable things that you could have picked out as like the things of the game. But it was AJ Storr. AJ Storr coming out of nowhere to give you his new Kansas career high, 19 points, 7 of 11 from the floor, 3 of 5 from three. We made mention of the number maybe a week or two ago, if you're an everydayer, you caught it, that last season AJ Storr averaged almost 17 points per game at Wisconsin. He never even had a game with 17 points at Kansas, but he does it in this moment in a big one. And it's impossible not to see some parallels in which you go back to a couple years ago and Remy Martin. At that point in time, I think I was looking back, Remy Martin had 0 12-point games in January and February combined. Now, part of that, he was injured for some of that, right? But he had a 12-point game in the Big 12 championship that year. And I think he had 10 points, I want to say, in the Big 12 semifinals. So he got going in the Big 12 tournament, which obviously led to a resurgence in the NCAA tournament. Maybe this is what gets AJ Storr going. And this comes a game after I was like, yeah, I don't know if we should have him in the rotation anymore. Well, proved me wrong there, right? And clearly he had a good game. The big key, though, is going to be, can he back it up in back-to-back games? Like, that is the real because if he does it next game, then you might be starting to think, okay, this is a streak, this is a stretch that is going to happen, especially against a team who he was just 0 for 4 against. But he was awesome in this game. He was making shots from all over. He was aggressive. There were actually like 2 loose balls that I want to say he got to. So those are the other things that you're kind of looking at there. And you could use that scoring punch. You need your offense to rise to the next level. That is one possible way of doing it, both in terms of giving you another bench score, giving you somebody who can play on the wing. Kansas hasn't had reliable wing play consistently this season, and it was also important because you didn't really get much from Ryland Griffin. So I mean, you had to have all of those from AJ Storr. If you would have said AJ Storr was going to go for 19 points, I would have thought, oh, okay, well, the spread's 10.5. Kansas probably won by 10, 15 points. It is crazy that they only won by 4. The reason why that happened, beyond the lack of clutch play, I guess you could say, was the lack of perimeter defense for KU. This is back-to-back games for UCF where they torched you from 3. They go 14 of 33 from 3 this game. The perimeter defense was bad for Kansas in this one. This wasn't just – there were a couple threes that Keyshawn Hall made where it was like, that was good defense. That dude just looked like a pro tonight and has for several other games this season. And there were a couple where, yeah, they did make those. But there were also a lot of other ones where it was like they got left wide open. That was bad communication. That was bad defense on some of this stuff. So you need to figure that stuff out. The good news is your next opponent, Arizona, isn't the best 3-point shooting team in the world. But you never know. A team can get hot if you leave them open repeatedly. So the defense, not great in this game. The offense was very good for Kansas in this game. But it is funny. Kansas leads the game for 39 minutes and 14 seconds. Didn't really feel that way based on how kind of back and forth the second half became. And Kansas was, they were a moment away from, just running through this game. And then that big run from UCF happens and you kind of let them back into the game. But I do think when you're looking at this box score, the biggest thing to me is that, you got your 2 big offensive weapons going. Hunter struggled in the first half, but he was great in the second half. Zeke Mayo was great all game long, scoring the basketball. And when you can do that, it makes you very difficult to defend. And then when you have the additive of 34 points from KJ Adams and AJ Storr, this becomes a good enough offense to win games. Normally, they're going to have the good enough defense to pair with that. That was not the case in this one, and I do think there was a big advantage for UCF in this game at the point guard position. Obviously, both of them fouled out with DeJuan Harris and Darius Johnson, but that was not a good game from DeJuan with the 4 turnovers, just 2 for 8 from the floor, struggled defending Darius Johnson, who had 22 points, 7 assists on 8 of 14 shooting. But maybe that'll just be a bad matchup for him. And, maybe the next game against Arizona will be a little bit better there. So bottom line here, Kansas gets the win. They're moving on to the Big 12 quarterfinals. At this point of the season, you don't balk about how you won. You just ask, did you win? Did you survive in advance, so to speak? And Kansas was able to do that, but certainly some things to work on for the games to come, still remaining on the schedule for KU basketball, and celebrate every win at this point of the season, because you don't know. Hopefully this isn't the case, right? But for all you know, every win is your last win of the season, right? You could lose to Arizona and you could lose in the first round of the NCAA tournament. I'm not saying that's what I'm picking to happen or that's what I think is going to happen. I'm just saying celebrate every win at this point of the season like it could be your last, because it could be your last. So enjoy it for what it is. And it was an entertaining victory, to say the least, for KU. All right, game awards, and then we'll get to a little preview of the KU-Arizona game next. This is Locked On Jayhawks. This episode of the show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where'd all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. You stop just managing your money and start building wealth. All in one convenience. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB Locked On College, at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code Locked On College for half off your first year with Monarch Money. Again, Locked On College. I continue on the show. Game awards for KU taking on UCF and winning the game 98-94. Let's start with our best moment of the game for KU. And, the very start of the game was one of the best moments of the game, because it was a clear arrival that Zeke Mayo was going to be here for this game. And it was a great start for him and for KU. They get up 8-0, and it was kind of like, okay, is KU going to be able to maybe even coast to a victory here? Obviously that didn't end up being the case, but it was important that Zeke was getting going in this game. And what was a very offensive game, you needed your offensive guys to keep making shots, and he did. But that was a good hot start. Hunter making 3 threes in general, that was huge, especially the one in overtime that got your scoring going in overtime. Honestly, maybe the play of the game, just in terms of the highlight itself, there was a play where Hunter Dickinson catches it at the wing at the left, and he's got a defender all over him, and he kind of catches the ball up to his ear, up to his shoulder area, and he just immediately slings it kind of sideways to the opposite side of the court. Diggy Coit's in the corner, catches, shoots the 3, and hits it. That was such an unbelievable pass from Hunter Dickinson, who was so good in this game for KU, and a big 3 made there for Diggy Coit. Made it 58-48. Unfortunately, UCF ended up coming back. The one play where DeJuan grabs the loose ball, then lobs it up ahead of the pack to KJ, who grabs it, dribbles a few times, and then throws down a dunk that capped the 6-0 run to put KU from down 3 to up 3. That was a cool moment of the game. The Zeke Mayo step back 3 straight on that made it 77-73. That was a good one. A couple KJ defensive / effort plays I think would go up here. The defensive possession where Keyshawn Hall's trying to go at him from kind of the baseline and from the right side if you're UCF, the left side if you're the Kansas defense viewing things, and KJ just stonewalled him. And Keyshawn Hall had a great game. He was great in the last 2 games against Kansas. When KJ Adams was on him, I'd imagine the numbers, it certainly felt this way watching it, would be the efficiency would be a lot worse with KJ on him than when it was anybody else on KU. And so when you have guys with Keyshawn Hall, especially when they're feeling it, you're never going to shut that guy out. You're never going to shut that guy down. It just becomes about making him work for it, making him more efficient in doing so. And he wasn't for the game, to be clear. He was still very efficient for the game. But when KJ was on him, it made him just a little bit more inefficient for the game. And then the other one, I guess maybe one of the final big plays of the game, the KJ Adams effort in overtime to get back and poke the ball. I mean, Keyshawn Hall was already kind of starting to lose it, but it looked like he had regained it. And then KJ was able to poke it out off him, goes out of bounds. you stay with the lead, you get the ball back 27 seconds, and then you're able to make enough free throws and enough stops from there to get the win. The worst moments of the game, just trying to stop Keyshawn Hall and Darius Johnson in general. I guess, those two guys combined for 47 points and did it on very high efficiency for UCF. I think it was a 17-3 run overall, but it was the 12 straight points, which was 4 made consecutive threes for UCF. That was probably the worst moment of the game, bar none. The loose ball, though, leading to Keyshawn Hall picking it up in the corner and making what was still a contested 3, that was a rough one from the perspective of, like, that's the type of play that happens against you when you lose a lot of tight games, but Kansas was able to overcome it nonetheless. The fouling Jordan Ivy Curry at the end of the game, that would be up there too. The Jordan Ivy Curry 3 that tied the game at the end of regulation, that would be up there. And then the other ones, the last 2 possessions for KU in regulation, the KJ Adams missed mid-range, and which that one you can live with at least a little bit more, but it still goes to the idea of, like, listen, KJ has his things he does well. You should not be asking this guy, especially in a game where, Zeke Mayo goes for 24, Hunter Dickinson goes for 23. AJ Storr is when he's going right, a mercenary scorer. Why is that the option there? But when he stepped out of bounds, and it almost was a feeling of like, oh, UCF's going to go down, make a shot, and hit a buzzer beater. Fortunately, that did not happen for KU, but again, they won the game in the end. Headache of the game. That is going to go to the court. That is not fun to watch. Apparently people are there saying it's not as bad in person. Well, good on you. But unfortunately, there are probably going to be more people watching on TV than in person. Okay, appalling stat of the game. Would it be that the Kansas shooting, like, you could have convinced me UCF came in and shot well, which they did because we've seen it before, but the Kansas would go, 44% from 3 and 78% on pretty good volume at the free throw line. I don't know, maybe a little bit appalling. Is it a little appalling that the Kansas got 17 offensive rebounds compared to just 27 defensive rebounds for UCF? Certainly, it is a big number for KU, but UCF came into the game not a very good defensive rebound team. I think the appalling stat of the game has to be, if you want to talk bench scoring, 30-13, but it's specifically why. AJ Storr scoring 19 points, that is the most appalling stat of the game. I don't think if you gave me, 10 guesses before the game started, if you were like, hey, somebody's going to go off tonight more than their expected role would have you thinking. Even if I did go down the line and was like, oh, okay, it'll be AJ Storr, I would have been like, did he score 12? 19 points from AJ Storr. That was crucial for KU. So that's the appalling side of the game in a good way. Would look good in a Kansas uniform next season. That award goes to Keyshawn Hall, who had 25 points and torched KU in both matchups. KU kind of needs a wing type to play possibly the 4 next year. See if Keyshawn Hall would be interested. Maybe a little longer handshake in the handshake line for Bill Self and company, if that would be of interest. The Double Trouble Award in the first half goes to Hunter Dickinson. Really struggled with the double teams in the first half, but overcame that big time. The second half Domination Award goes to Hunter Dickinson. If you combine overtime with it, this is unbelievable. Hunter Dickinson in the second half and overtime had 20 points and 8 rebounds. That would have been a good day at the office for the game. He was phenomenal for the final 25 minutes of the game and once again kind of putting the team on his back after he did have a rough first half. Offensive MVP for KU. This one's tough because Hunter Dickinson, you get 3 offensive rebounds. You do get the 23 points. But, the shooting wasn't there in the first half. You also end up with 4 turnovers. So because of that, I'm going to go Zeke Mayo. Now, I could go AJ Storr as well, because with AJ Storr, it's more found money. Like it was a little bit more unexpected. You could also go with KJ Adams for that same reason, although he's been on a tear recently where 15 isn't really a surprise at this point with the way he's playing on offense right now. But for Zeke, some of the step back threes, the start to the game, the 24 points were huge. And I just continue to like those pick and rolls where it's Zeke and Hunter Dickinson. I want even more of them. I know they do them a fair amount, but like I want even more of them, make it happen even more because I think that's where KU's best offensive stats are. But yeah, we'll give it to Zeke and then honorable mention to AJ Storr and Hunter Dickinson. Defensive MVP for KU. So this one is interesting because I don't think you can go with Juwan Harris. I think he struggled guarding Darius Johnson. I don't think you could go Hunter Dickinson. I mean, he did have 10 defensive rebounds, a block, and 2 steals. Sham was pretty good for them, 13 points, was able to space him out a little bit there. I think Dickinson was fine on the defensive end. I'm just not quite ready to go like MVP level on that end. I think you have to go KJ Adams. I mean, he had 3 blocks. The rest of KU had 3 blocks combined. He had 3 steals. The rest of KU combined had 5 steals. And the hustle plays, the times where he did defend Keyshawn Hall and make life a little bit more difficult on him, I think you got to go with KJ Adams for defensive MVP in this one for KU. All right, what's next for KU? They're going to be taking on Arizona in the quarterfinals. We'll get to a quick preview for the KU-Arizona game coming up next on Locked On Jayhawks. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Factor Meals. Looking to optimize your nutrition this year, Factor makes eating well easy with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals that are fresh, never frozen, and ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences every week, you can customize your meals to fit your lifestyle, whether it's Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. Plus, Factor even offers wholesome smoothies, breakfasts, and grab-and-go snacks to keep you fueled all day long. I love how Factor takes the stress out of meal planning, and you don't really have to make hard decisions anymore. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 off and use code lockedoncollege50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code lockedoncollege50 off at factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box with Factor Meals. Today's episode of the show is also brought to you by Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now, Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax at TurboTax.com. Only available at TurboTax live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. So finishing things up on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks with a preview of the Arizona game. Because this game went to overtime, it's so late. We're just going to mash preview, recap all in one. And then tomorrow we will have a little bit of another postcast based on whatever happens at the KU-Arizona game. So I think it's important when we're previewing this one. It is a little bit easier because this game just happened on Saturday. So if you do want some more in-depth stuff than just 5-10 minutes, I'm going to go on it right now. If you're an everydayer, you already caught it, but you can re-listen to the show. Maybe get a refresher from last Friday for a KU-Arizona preview. Again, obviously a little bit different now this go around, but what happened in that first matchup, it's fresh in our mind. Kansas won 83-76. Kansas shot really well on twos, 54%, 8 of 21 on threes, 38% for KU. Arizona shot well on threes, 38%, but it's low volume, and they're not normally a big-time three-point shooting team, but obviously KU doesn't defend the three super well, so their number's probably going to go up. The biggest thing for Kansas in this game, 13 offensive rebounds. They held Arizona to just 7. Arizona is one of the best offensive rebound teams in the country. In fact, they're 15th in the country as I'm looking at it right now. In Big 12 only games, they are 3rd. If you can do that again on the glass, I think you're going to feel good about your result if you're KU, especially if you combine it with just having 5 turnovers like you had in Allen Fieldhouse. Now, from a player perspective, you got a good performance from DeJuan Harris. He's going to have to play better in this game than he did in the first game. He had 9 points, 9 assists to 1 turnover. You need that DeJuan more than the guy you had in the win over UCF. Hunter was unbelievable. Can you get something close to that? 33 points, 10 rebounds. Zeke Mayo, back-to-back 20-point games. When you go back to this one, what happened in the first one, it's interesting because AJ Storr gave you a ton in the UCF game. He was 0 for 4 against Arizona with 0 stats in 8 minutes. So what are you going to get out of him is kind of the ultimate wild card here. And then, when you look at Diggy Coit, didn't have his best game. He did hit that one corner 3. Didn't really have one against Arizona. He's been a guy who you can't really predict it. It's just like one game he's going to be hot, and then maybe a couple games he's going to be down, then maybe a couple games he's going to be hot. maybe the pendulum will swing again on Diggy Coit coming into this one. But overall, you look at this matchup with Arizona that just happened. The Wildcats are going to come into this game ranked 16th on KenPom. They are 20-11. They had kind of a bad night. They started 4-5, so the record isn't indicative of how they're playing. They have now won 16 of their last 22 games, and obviously earned a top 4 seed, earned the 3 seed in the Big 12 tournament. It's a team who plays fast. It's a team who rebounds the ball well. It's a team who shoots twos really well, defends the two very well, and on games that Caleb Love can get hot from the outside, that's usually when the three-point shooting as a team goes up. So that'll be important. He actually had a solid game against Kansas, but it wasn't like huge efficiency or just bombing like 5 made threes or something like that. So that'll be very interesting. And for Kansas, this is a very important game because the UCF win, I think, keeps you from maybe dropping a seed in the NCAA tournament. Maybe the win over Arizona on Saturday puts you around that 6 or 7 line for the NCAA tournament. You lose to UCF, it probably puts you at the 7 or 8 line, right? Now you don't have to worry about that. Now it feels like the floor is being probably a 7 seed for KU. You win a game like this, maybe the floor is the 6 seed, and maybe that 5 seed starts to come into focus a little bit more if you can win a game like this. Obviously, Arizona is going to be playing for some NCAA tournament seeding as well. And the other big thing coming into this game is going to be, how does Kansas respond to you just played an overtime game and you were the late game, right? You're going to be going to bed late. Now, the good news is you're the late game again tomorrow, but is there a fatigue factor that sets in? How much does AJ Storr contributing as much as he did? And, I guess DeJuan Harris fouling out, not having to play as many minutes, does that actually in a different way help you? Because Storr probably has fresher legs over the course of the season. And maybe you'll have certain guys that now will be able to be spelled for him a little bit more. It's going to be super interesting, especially when you play a game this quick of a turnaround. A lot of times you can see games that are maybe a little bit more clunky because when they've played this close of a turnaround, now it's fresh in their mind what you do, the scouting reports, what plays you run, to where some of that stuff can be harder to get open. And if it is a grind out game, I don't really know who that favors, because Arizona does like to play fast, but also when you think of grind out games, you think of, the battle inside, and they are a good rebounding team and good 2-point shooting team. Kansas has been a good 2-point shooting team too. So should be a fun one against Arizona, and the winner of Kansas, Arizona will move on to the semifinals, take on the winner of Texas Tech and Baylor on the bottom end of the bracket in the Big 12 tournament. If we are talking, I guess, keys to the game for KU against Arizona, I would say the rebounding is certainly chiefs amongst them. I would go back to the one I talked about last Friday, like try to keep Caleb Love in check, try to make him inefficient, because if you do that, he's going to keep firing up shots, and it's going to make their offense more inefficient. I would also add to it, though, we saw Jaden Bradley have a really good game in Allen Fieldhouse. KU struggled to stay in front of him, let him get to the rim a lot and get some easy buckets. You're going to have to figure out a better way to defend Jaden Bradley, I think, in the second go-around, because I don't know that you can bank on Visar, their center, and Del Orso, their 3-point marksman, for combining for just 8 points again. Probably going to get more points from those two guys combined this time, which means you need to find other areas to kind of shave off points at the other end. And especially what if you only get 25 points from Hunter as opposed to 33? Who else can step up for KU on the offensive end of the court? Maybe it'll be AJ Storr, right? Especially after the game today. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. Back at you late Thursday night for a Kansas-Arizona postcast. See you then with LOJ.